How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. I want to give you a quick update on something that is absolutely crazy. One of the possibly most bullish things that could happen for cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, I think, is for the US to adopt it and to really add it to their balance sheet along with other countries. And we're seeing the early stages of that happening right now. Now, of course, BlackRock, Fidelity, those companies are trying to add it, trying to get ETFs, trying to buy up public shares of companies that are crypto related. And I think that the government's probably doing the same thing. Before we get into this, if you don't mind, please hit subscribe, turn on that bell notification. I got home from a dinner out with friends and I saw this news and I had to make a video. So if you like that, hit subscribe. So I think countries are probably adding it to their balance sheet really quietly. They're adding exposure. It would just make sense if investors are adding exposure and large investors are adding exposure. Countries should have some Bitcoin, and it's probably one of those things that they don't want to be real obvious about because it could undermine their own position as the global economic power. Recently, though, we saw Larry Fink talk about how literally he thinks that this could essentially be the global reserve currency. How he thinks it could transcend other assets, other currencies as well in valuation and use. Now, RFK, who is a presidential candidate, we'll talk about how likely he is to win in a second, outlines presidential plan to partially back new public debt issuance with Bitcoin and precious metals. He also talks about exempting BTC from capital gains tax. He says, my plan would be to start very, very, very small. Just to be clear, anyone that's just pushing out that he wants to buy Bitcoin and back treasuries with Bitcoin, it's a little bit misleading. He does say that though, but he's talking about maybe 1% of issued T-bills would be backed by hard currency, by gold, silver, platinum, or Bitcoin. Kennedy said, describing his vision for returning to a hard currency standard in the US. Now, whether you like him or not, I think it is a big step forward for a presidential candidate who is getting a lot of attention. He's getting a lot of eyeballs to talk about this. I think is pretty positive with everything else going on at the same time. The Bitcoin having ETFs, big hedge funds trying to get into this, inflation coming down. This is a perfect setup. And now this just brings more attention to Bitcoin. Now, RFK holds 15% support in the Democratic primary. A lot of people that I've been listening to like him. A lot of people think he's kind of an alpha male because he can do push-ups. I don't think that really matters too much, I'll be honest, but it does bring more attention to Bitcoin. Now, what would this do, right? Even though he's not the number one candidate probably for the Democratic side, still brings more attention. As I said, still is a possibility that he could win. And recently, we have been issuing a ton of debt. So the debt held by the public stands at $24.64 trillion in the U.S. This represents debt securities like treasury bonds and notes, bought by banks, insurance companies, state and local governments, foreign governments, and private investors. So basically $25 trillion. So just real back of the napkin math. Debt from treasury bills or notes and that kind of stuff. $24 trillion. Look how many zeros, right? 1% of that goes into these assets that would back it. That would be $240 billion. If we put a third of that into Bitcoin, so let's say we split a third of it into gold, a third of it into platinum/silver, and then a third of it into Bitcoin, that would mean $80 billion towards Bitcoin. Now, that's going to be over a variety of years, over a number of years. It's not going to be just all in right away. So let's say they have to replenish this every 10 years. They have to continue to buy more and more Bitcoin, and they continue to increase it. That could add around $8 billion worth of buying pressure to Bitcoin, which is a significant amount. Now, there's a multiple usually. When there's someone buying a significant amount of Bitcoin, it pushes up the price more than that market cap. So if someone buys $8 billion worth of Bitcoin, it's going to push up the market cap a lot more than $8 billion. And it gets even more of a multiple as you're buying more. So That makes a lot of sense when you scale up, because there's only about $50 billion worth of Bitcoin on exchanges right now. So if someone were to go buy 20% of that, it would push up the price very quickly. A lot of people would see that too. A lot of people would see the news and then buy a ton, and it would just force up the price really quickly. So this would be huge for Bitcoin's price. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen. I'm not even saying it's likely to happen. But when you think about all the different things adding up, all the different hedge funds that might add it, all the different pension funds, all the different 401ks, if there's an ETF option that might add this as an emerging asset class, all the different pies and portfolios that might allocate, a couple percent to this. So instead of the 60-40 portfolio where you have 60% stocks, 40% bonds, you have 60, or let's say 80-15-5 or something like that, where 5% is going to gold and Bitcoin, or just Bitcoin. That could be huge. There's a lot of buying pressure. And it's one of those things where it's consistent buying pressure. If this were to actually happen, which I'm not saying, again, that I think it's necessarily going to happen or that's likely to happen, but if this were to happen, you have to realize that the US is going to continue to increase their debt load. They're going to continue printing more and more money. If this was the case and they started with 1%, they'd probably add to it over time or get rid of it altogether. But I would think that they would probably continue to up this a little bit more if this was what they were pushing for, trying to get a hard currency standard in the US. I don't think people are too likely to want that to happen. I think the government likes being able to print just about any amount of money without having to worry about getting any kind of collateral to back it up. But we'll have to see, right? This could, like I said, push up the price pretty significantly. We know that the US government is kind of in the pocket of BlackRock or vice versa, right? BlackRock controls more assets than every other asset manager on earth. Fidelity close behind that, and they're both very bullish on cryptocurrency. So people are going to start putting this in their 401ks once there's an ETF approved. They're going to buy from the time they're 22 to the time that they're 65 without even knowing. They're going to be pensions that do the same thing, to trying to get some kind of better return than 5 to 8% or 2 to 5%. Bonds are not very attractive over the last couple of years. Treasury yields are great, but at a time of high inflation, right, you can get 5% treasury yield, but you're risking 20% returns on the S&P 500. You're risking 100% returns on a lot of tech companies, missing 100% returns on Bitcoin too. So I'll be making a video later this week, actually this weekend, on how much Bitcoin you need and the different wealth levels of Bitcoin. That's really what I'm going to be talking about, because I have done a video on how much Bitcoin you need if you want to be the average person or the average holder of Bitcoin. But looking at, what will 0.1 Bitcoin mean in 10 to 20 years? How will you be looked at? If you have 1 Bitcoin, if you have 0.01 Bitcoin, all that kind of stuff, what you can do with your life, how that will set you up financially and all that. So be on the lookout for that. If you don't mind, hit subscribe underneath the video, turn on that bell notification. Let me know what you think about this news. It's pretty splashy. I'll tell you that. It's pretty splashy and could turn some heads. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Be ready for the mainstream media and for people in general to just laugh at this, think RFK is a crazy person. He has some views that not everyone believes, but it should be interesting to see how this all turns out. And I'm very bullish on crypto, so I don't mind this extra attention. Let me know your thoughts, though. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Check out the links underneath the video if you want to support the channel, and I'll see you in the next.